July 1945, Downton Abbey audience had been granted that afternoon, with George, and also Lady Mary, who invited both Thomas and Ernst to sit down. Caroline is preparing for the evening, Lady Mary told them. Mrs. Hughes and Mr. Carson have both agreed you may speak to them, Ernst, she told the boy. Perhaps you can arrange this. Barrow? I would be pleased to, Thomas told them. Carson, since the evacuees had arrived, had handed over all responsibility to him, with Master George's enthusiastic agreement, and smiled at Lady Mary. She and Henry both lived at Downton Abbey, although they spent a lot of time away up at Brancaster, with Edith and Bertie. Surprisingly, they missed one another, and their children, cousins to one another, had grown up so much in each other's company they were like one big family. Branson is at the shop, Mary told them. Under the circumstances, I thought it best not to involve him. Barrow, when you asked for anyone who knew me, Lucina, was she guessing? Thomas wondered. She had tried the same with Lady Edith. Had Branson actually told Lord Grantham, as was, or had he confided in Mary? He guessed not, and that Lady Mary Talbot was fishing. Yes, Lady Mary, I did. Although, I must say, it was hard to credit that there would only be yourself. There was Mama, Mary admitted. But I thought, under the circumstances, she would not contribute much that would justify the stress in moving from the Dower House. Sibby is caring for her very well. The Dowager Grantham, Lady Cora, had been suffering from some kind of heart problem. WHCH seemed to have been brought on when her American family had lost everything in the Wall Street crash of 1929, and got worse on Robert Crawley's death, as well as succeeding to the role of flight lieutenant in 1940. The 18-year-old George had learned he was the Earl of Grantham, having lost his grandfather to a stroke. And this is the young boy you mentioned? Lady Mary asked. She cast a critical eye over Ernst Skoltz. You'd better tell us about him, Mr. Barrow, and his place at Downton. I let him stay, although I believed his name to be Ashby, George told his mother, almost an admission of miscalculation. He would, of course, because he believed that concealing truths was a poor way to go, and added, he was an evacuee, or so I thought. And, somehow, I recognize the name Ashby. I will go, Ernst said, suddenly, getting to his feet. Mr. Brough, you have been so good to me in helping me locate my mother. He nodded, and then nodded to George Crawley, and you, sir, in allowing me to live in your home. Ernst, Thomas said to him, quickly, standing too. It's all right, they aren't throwing you out. But, Mr. Brough, Ernst told him, now they know I am German, of course they will. He touched his forehead. He had got it because he had walked home from school that day alone, for Larry Parker, told to walk with Ernst to and from school by his mother and father, would always run off and walk ahead with his other friends, pulling Flora, who was always willing to be with Ernst, with him. Ernst had been in trouble at school for this sort of thing before. Mr. Melsley had been more than willing to take him on, and he sat on the same row as Larry and Flora, but Johnny Bates had been the bane of the boy's life. No longer at school, he worked on the estate, and would throw things at Ernst, and call him names. He had put up with it for a long time, until the young man had thrown through a brick at him that afternoon which hit him about the temple. I will not have you fighting, Thomas had told him, when that lie had come to his ears. Ernst had said nothing, and waited for his punishment. He was everything that Johnny Bates had said, a kraut, the son of a murderer, not Mr. Skoltz, but his birth father, wherever he was. It was well known the Uranverin were working night and day trying to get an atomic bomb for the Chancellor. It was in all of the newspapers, all the propaganda. Suddenly, the door burst open. It was clear that the conversation was not being kept discreet. Flora Parker had pushed her way in, shaking off her brother in the process. It wasn't Ernst's fault. Flora looked between Thomas and Ernst, as Larry was trying to stop her from pushing past him. But righteous zeal turned out to be stronger still, and she had got past her brother and was standing before Thomas, hands on her hips. It were 3 boys, she told him, Ingering Lady Mary and Master George. 2 at school, and Johnny Bates. They keep calling him names, and chasing him, stealing his things, she told Thomas. And Johnny Bates threw a brick at him. Larry Parker, Lady Mary said, taking command of the situation, as Ernst stood there, not knowing whether to stay now, or go. That is your name, isn't it? She added, when the boy gaped at her. He nodded. Yes, your ladyship. Flora curtsied and nodded her head. It is his name. Will you call up Mrs. Bates? I think she needs to hear this. And within 10 minutes, Anna Bates was standing in the library, horror-struck. Then, the defense, which is what Thomas had heard every time Johnny had ever been in trouble. Not Johnny's fault. He doesn't know. Not Johnny's fault. He attacked the boys first because he was scared of them. Not Johnny's fault. He saw the dried fruits and took it. Never mind that he needed teaching, never mind that the boys were smaller than him, never mind the candied peel belonged to a little girl whose widowed mother accepted widow's dole and had nothing else to send her to school with that day. It's what goes of bringing a German into the house, your ladyship, if I may speak frankly. Looks like you're going to, Thomas said, ignoring the black look Anna had given to her. There was sorrow in his heart for her. Mr. Bates had died shortly after Johnny's 5th birthday. But there was no excuse for her excuses for him. Some people had much worse lives than Johnny Bates. Schooled until he was 15, job for life courtesy of George Crawley at the behest of his mother, at the behest of Anna Bates. Ernst is not German, insofar that he is English, Thomas told her, ignoring the fact that Daisy's twins were still in the library. A reason to tell me Lucina's story, make everyone know what she had done with her life, how it was she had died, what she had sacrificed her life for. Ernst, these people knew your mother, he told him, glancing at the knock. I am sure his lordship will decide a suitable consequence for Johnny Bates. No, no, Thomas added, as the boy, and Anna, were about to protest. He cannot treat you like this. People in this country do not treat people like this. He put a hand on Ernst's shoulder for a moment, and added, in your country, as much as Germany is your country, with your permission, would you allow me to tell Lord Grantham? He nodded to Master George, and Lady Mary Talbot your story. With a brief hesitation, Ernst nodded. 8,888,888. Come, sit. Master George told Thomas and Ernst. You too, Mrs. Bates. He glanced over to the Parker twins. Please, sit too, he told them. Lady Mary looked at her son in disbelief. They're only going to press their ears to the door to hear anyway, he told her. They might as well hear the full discussion, rather than half of it, and get the wrong message, wouldn't you agree? He saw his mother inhale disbelievingly. But Mary Talbot could not fault her son's logic. Sit by the window, and do not move, she told them. Now, she said, in a kinder tone to Ernst Scholz, are you happy for all of these people to know about you, of where you come from, and why you are here? She watched the boy turn his head to Thomas, looking for a cue. For once, Barrow did not try to influence the course of the decision, Mary noticed. Yes, your ladyship, Ernst told her. I'd very much like to learn more of my mother. I believe you knew her well? Lady Mary smiled, amused by this boy's humility. Ernst, he was indeed earnest and willing to trust them. How long had he been at Downton, anyway? Had Thomas genuinely been waiting for a moment to speak to them, or had he been hiding Milo Ashby's son from them? For it could only be her son, Mary reasoned, for him to take so much care over his welfare. I first remember your mother falling into the fountain out there, Lady Mary told him, when she could have been no more than 5 years old. Drenched through, she was. She looked at Anna. Do you remember that, Mrs. Bates? I do indeed, Anna Bates told them, not being able to hold back a smile. Thomas, who had been clenching his right hand, suddenly released it. Perhaps he was not going to break down after all. Her brother, Ernest, told Lady Edith she had been looking for where the light went. Anna went on. Wasn't Lady Edith sweet on him? She added. It was something only Anna could have got away with, and Lady Mary rolled her eyes. She was sweet on every young man, she said dismissively of her sister. Anyway, Lady Mary added, glancing to Thomas. He was an apostrophe T.1 for the ladies. And then back to Ernst. It was very touching she named you after him. He died just at the end of the Great War, did he not, Mr. Barrow? Yes, Lady Mary, Thomas agreed, and touched his livery for a moment. He did. And yourself, Ernst? I am Ernest, really, Ernst admitted, and the 3 things he had brought with him from Germany to Downton were in his hand. She tells of her brother, and her search for a good family for me in the letter to them. They kept it, whether for me, or just kept it. Ernst shrugged. Herr und Frau, Mr. and Mrs. Scholz, he corrected, were a good family. Neither joined the Nazi party, he added. Neither supported the Reich, as far as I knew. That ended the conversation quickly. But it had been what Ernst had wanted to say for so long. Not everyone had supported the fascists, and not everyone had been in a position to leave their homeland. So many people were looking for a break, somewhere they could fight back without the end of the line being, well, the end of their lives. It was ironic that his father, his adopted father, had given a smile sometimes when the Lancaster bombers went over. Death was coming, but also tiny holes in the German war machine. It was why Ernst hated the idea of his birth father so much. Everyone knew his name. Everything he knew of the man. His values. His beliefs. It was why he was here. What had made his mother, an English woman, who had died in Germany 2 years before, have a relationship with the man? The English were the liberators, were they not? Had she been a fascist, a Nazi? She had been a physicist, Thomas Barrow had told him that. And she knew of uranium. There were a lot of answers he wanted. He needed. Oh, how naive he had been to think she was just this woman in a dress, going about her business in England, waiting for him to find her. A child's dream, out of a storybook. Even the brothers Grimm could not have thought up the horrors that were in Ernst's mind. I am sure they were not, Master George reassured him. Just as some British people were involved in fascism here. So, it was like that? Me Lucina Ashby was a fascist, after all. Please, tell us of your life in Germany, Lady Mary encouraged. And we will tell you all we know of Milo. 88,888,888. May I see the marriage certificate, Master George asked Ernst, when they had finished. The young man glanced briefly to Thomas, and then reached into his pocket. George Crawley looked at it, seeing me Lucina's name, and Thomas's. He saw the date, 25th of August 1920. And that the marriage had taken place in Edinburgh. And there it is. Matthew Reginald Crawley. Lady Mary looked over at her son, seeing his face as he read his father's name. And you were married, and my father oversaw? Master George asked Thomas. We were not yet married, his mother interrupted. But yes, she glanced over to Thomas Barrow. I do remember we came back here, and there was hell to pay, Thomas told them, giving a little laugh. You remember, Anna? She nodded, cursorily. One who was not happy, of course, was your... He broke off, glancing to Mary, then looking away. And then, he looked back to Master George. Your father was there, when me Lucina and I married, Thomas Barrow confirmed. And, if you look a little further down, your grandmother. Isabel Crawley, George Crawley said softly, tracing the letters of her name. 88,888,888. If it happens again, come to me, Thomas told Ernst, after the offer of unlimited stay at Downton had been assured by both Master George and his mother. Thomas had followed Ernst into the yard at the back of the kitchen, ignoring the faces of the twins as they hung at the back door. Both Lady Mary and Giora Crawley knew of Milo's death, and that she had been recruited for special operations. Working undercover, to try to bring down the regime, George had told him at the time. 2 years ago, 18th of August, 1943 had been the date on the telegram. But I have never heard of Nacht und Nebel. Lady Mary had, for she had been making inquiries. It was not for the faint-hearted, and she had called Thomas Barrow to meet with her and George, breaking the news as gently as she could. It was a death camp operation, for resistance fighters, men and women both torture. I am sorry to say, she added, in her brisk, pragmatic tone which conveyed none of the emotion she was feeling. Thomas, too, stood still and silent, telling her he understood. It had not been until a letter, of all things, had arrived at the cottage with Ernest's name on it, our letter lost for nearly 25 years, still bearing a stamp of the king's father, asking, for all things, Ernest to call in on us any time. Old fellow, we would be pleased to know you once this bloody war is over. It had been signed by a Hilary Best, someone Thomas had never heard of, and he had crumpled, there on the stairs of the Ashby cottage, breaking down over words that reminded him of a time that his lover had been close to him, and his little sister had been keenly opening her eyes to physics, not dying in agony, screaming, as Thomas imagined poor Milo, at the hands of the State Security Service, as they tortured her for secrets. His wife, and he could not protect her to the last. They had left upstairs with a reluctant promise that Anna would stop her son from physical assaults, any physical assaults, and that Ernst, as Milo's son, would be welcome to stay at Downton indefinitely. Thomas had to explain it meant as long as he liked, which brought a smile to Flora's face and a frown to Larry's. If it happens again, I will not, Ernst replied, defiantly, and began to walk towards the gate and out of the grounds. Thomas matched the boy stride for stride. I will stand up to it, though. He turned from Thomas. Defend myself, that is. The truth is, I am ashamed. Little of what I have learned in England is told in Germany, naturaless. Perhaps I should write to Constable Pickering and take him up on his offer of living with him. I know my mother is dead, but I do not want to go back to Germany. Thomas's heart lurched. He had grown fond of the boy, and the thought of losing him now was a shock too much. Please stay. If you do not wish to stay here, there is your mother's family's cottage. And, leaving a message with Andy, as he strode the other way, that he was in charge for now, he walked with Ernst down to Downton village. As the astonished first footman watched them go, what Ernst saw shocked and amazed him: a cottage, fully furnished, as English as he could ever have imagined, and a shop at the front full of amazing, if old-fashioned electrical equipment. What talent do you have, Ernst? Thomas asked him. Mine is horology clocks and the like. Watches. He pulled out the watch Milo had mended by his brother, and told him the story. She sounds like a kind woman, Mr. Brough, he told Thomas. Thomas, please, he told Ernst. For one thing, as well as resembling his father, the way he pronounced Thomas's surname was unnerving. I am sure I can make these work, though they are old, he told Thomas. Could all my Ashby family fix electrical items? Not just fix, Thomas told him. Ernest. Your uncle, he could make things from scratch, from the parts. And your grandfather and Ernest installed the electricity at Downton. It is how I came to know your mother's family. Ernst gave Thomas a rare smile. And was my mother as mischievous as the Lord and Lady told? Thomas smiled. He liked remembering Milo as a child, as a confused child trying to work out the world. Oh, yes. He nodded. She wanted to know about everything. It must have been hard on her, the lessons she had to learn. And she had a keen interest in apples, for some reason. Perhaps tomorrow, I will ask Mrs. Crawley if she would let us go into her garden. She is Master George's other grandmother, Thomas added. Why so? Ernst asked. Because, Mrs. Crawley agreed that Milo could plant the seeds in her garden. Some of them even grew. She was the lady on my mother's, your, marriage certificate. Ernst looked at him, waiting. Yes. Thomas added, it has been many years since I've seen them. I think it would be the right time. And then Thomas watched as Ernst's glance looked around the cottage and the shop, as if weighing something up. I like it here, he told Thomas at last. Who lives here? No one, Thomas told him. I do not rent it out. There have been many problems with it before. But he did not tell the boy the real reason, that without Ernest, even after so many years, and even Milo, for here at the cottage, Thomas was sure, had been the last time he had seen her number. He was convinced of it. She told him she was going to London in answer to an advertisement for a job. Presumably, now, the special operations job, which had cost her her life. Not for the first time Thomas had become angry at the thought. Brave, intelligent people, he knew, must have been risking their lives behind enemy lines. Why did it have to be Milo? And they had parted on poor terms. Milo seemed to think Thomas had been ignoring her, and had said, "If you even care." "Of course I care," he had told her. But he had heard nothing from her since hearing about Chadwick's success with the Neutron, which Milo had been working on for nearly a decade with him. That had been in 1932. She had done ... what since then? Milo had never written to tell him what, and she was the one telling Thomas he didn't care. "Yes," Ernst said eventually. "I like it here. I like the electrical equipment and the tools. I like that my mother lived here." He turned to Thomas. "I will work for Downton while I am at school, and after I have left, I can work here." "You can work here any time," Thomas told him, relief flooding his body. Ernst had chosen to stay. Half of Milo, a quarter of Ernest. He could do what he could for Milo, where he had been able to do nothing for her. "Come back with me to the big house, Ernst," Thomas asked him, "so we can discuss this with Lady Mary and Master George."